Today, we're going to briefly discuss the impact of technology on modern athlete monitoring. I'm Vogel, an ASCA Master Level 3 strength and conditioning coach and an ASCA Level 2 accredited sports scientist. For the purpose of this presentation, I'm going to switch up a video so you can see the entire screen when we get through the next few slides. When we start to look at technology in sports, we have to understand that sports tech isn't just about GPS analysis or the things we attach to our body so we can assess performance. It's far more than that. When we start to look at performance analytics, that's probably about 60% of our sports tech that we are used to. So when we look at our GPS and how we set that up, it's all the analytics that occur in the back end. We've got different VR that can be used. So instead of risking yourself or risking the athlete in a high stress situation, you can make decisions by using VR. So reducing that overall risk on the athlete's body. You have different smart stadiums where your ticket is linked to different engagement factors within the actual game or event that is happening. Not to forget other different aspects we just don't even think about. And the little part of GPS that we see a lot of times is less than 0.01% of the sports tech that actually exists. Now, just a quick one as an example is this little picture on the right-hand side shows a bunch of different technologies that can be used to assess performance. A lot of these, though, are heavily based in research. So as an example, when we look at motion tracking, you can use an infrared tracking system where you've got little reflectors on different aspects or different parts of the limb. And that's where you get your classic 3D models that we see in different movies, your gold standard to assess movement. However, AI has started to be used in video analysis and compared to your motion tracking. So you can use 2D video to get the same types and nearly just as accurate measures. So there is some progression on our research types of technology, but a lot of these aren't going to be used because they're not practical to use in team settings that you may be used to. And an example of this is our list on the left. So things we are used to using is such athlete testing technology, such as your VALD and Access IT systems, like your force plates or your dynamometry, athlete management systems, which assess your sleep and wellness and tracking of different metrics across the season. So you can prepare for a game and get readiness scores or fatigue scores. You got in-game monitoring systems, such as your GPS or accelerometry and heart rate. You have velocity-based training devices, such as your GymAware and your output sports systems. And those two types of devices are accelerometry and linear position transducers that monitors the velocity of the barbell when you're training, so you can have a more efficient training session. Continuous physiological monitoring, where you're looking at glucose monitors that have been classically used for diabetics, but now starting to be used for endurance sports. You can also assess lactic acid continuously through similar types of devices. And then you got video and AI analysis, which I touched on at the start of the slide. So all those types of sports tech that we use, and that's probably less than 10% of sports tech that exists in the world that we just don't consider. Now, we have to understand and acknowledge that as coaches, we are definitely biased towards being uncomfortable physically, whereas technology helps us be uncomfortable intellectually. We have to think of technology as just another tool in the toolbox, rather than thinking of our speed and our fitness components and how we coach that is a tool in the toolbox. They're just other tools. But we've got to recognize the importance of technology in the ever-evolving sports space. Once we start to understand that and accept that, then we're going to find integrating technology far easier. And this is where we come to the big question. Can technology be integrated? Can it be managed? And are we able to analyze the data effectively? This is the big question you need to answer. And that comes with a few further considerations, such as cost. How much is this going to cost yourself, the athlete, the club? And then within that, the time cost also exists. So what time is it going to cost you? Say you have a contract for a specific club and you want to integrate a certain technology. How much extra time is that going to take you to utilize it effectively and integrate that you may A, not be paid for, or B, the club decides not to give you that extra remuneration because you're the one that wanted to integrate it? There are little things that we've got to consider. Then the actual time it's going to take to convince the stakeholders, convince the coaches, not to mention all the data analytics that we've just covered. So there is a time cost and a cost of the technology itself. Then there's two big questions. Is it valid and reliable? And what is the end goal? What is the end goal should be the first question you're really asking, because if you're not going to use it effectively to integrate for enhancing performance, then what are we really using it for? Are we just using it to keep up with the trends, but we don't know how to use the technology? Think of those considerations before we decide to integrate. Now, obviously we've covered a little bit about what sports tech is and what the considerations are to integrate. But where do I actually start with asking those questions? Well, I'll give you a little bit of background. This is a case study for myself. I was fortunate enough to meet the head of performance or head of medical at Queensland Ballet when I was a keynote speaker for National Science Week quite a few years ago. I asked them how they track their athletes, and they said, "What do you mean tracking?" I said, "Well, heart rate or GPS or anything like that." They go, "No." "Well, do you ask how they feel?" "No." "Okay, any chance I can come down and have a look at what you do?" "Yeah, that'd be great." So I was very fortunate enough to head into a company such as Queensland Ballet to actually see what they did. And myself and one of the physios there, Louise Drysdale, was very supportive of what I did as well. And we looked at jump mats, we looked at GPS, we looked at heart rate technology, and they all weren't really that effective until we looked at accelerometry. And then we assessed 14 different ballet movements and found some similarities between them all. And then I built an inertial measurement unit, programmed that unit, got some data. We bought a more expensive unit that was more valid and reliable, because I couldn't say that the device I created was valid and reliable enough. We had nothing to test against. And so we actually were able to create a load monitoring system using a single inertial measurement unit in ballet, classical ballet. And this has been an actual interest for the ballet world across the globe. We presented on this in Texas a few years ago. But the issue here is that we needed an algorithm to assess the data post-collection. Early on, it was great, but how do you then implement that? And we found there was a limitation with being able to provide data immediately. And so the artistic director eventually lost interest. So there is no current technology that can provide you those immediate feedback systems for something like classical ballet. So we couldn't effectively integrate it. Some more example pitfalls, and this come from an article called To Tech or Not to Tech by Wint et al. And so it's a really good paper to read. And a few of these is using GPS for team sports. So example that anything over 5 meters a second could be inaccurate. When you look at GPS, there are actually 4 different types of systems that are used, and combining all 4 systems becomes more accurate, but using a single system is less accurate. It needs to make sure it can connect to more than 14 satellites at a time to get the best accuracy. So there are limitations in the technology that we do use. Look at time constraints when performance is wavering. When you're with a team or an athlete and performance starts to drop, what is the priority for the athlete? Is it still being able to use technology and assess what's happening? Or will the coach back away, remove technology and try and focus on more time with the athlete? So what happens when worst case scenario occurs? Do you still get that time? What reports are you getting and delivering? A lot of software have immediate reports that you get. And when you get these reports, you might not get the data you actually need. So can you get the raw data? Can you analyze the raw data and then deliver it effectively to the coaches? Because technology does not communicate, and we have to understand that. It is the person that transitions this data to the coach and helps people understand what they're actually looking at. So these are just a few considerations we have to think of when we're looking at sports tech and how this can actually impact modern athlete monitoring. I'm going to finish with a quote from Kobe Bryant, because as much as we're coaches, we've got to understand that the athletes need to buy into what we do. Kobe said, "Technology has opened up a world of possibilities in sport, allowing athletes to push the limits of what we thought was possible and achieve things that were once considered impossible." How can you effectively implement technology, and is it worth it? Thanks for listening.